Now, programming from the Illinois Channel, an independent, nonpartisan corporation formed to provide nonpartisan coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois. For more information on the Illinois Channel, please visit our website at www.illinoischannel.org.
Just ahead, on July 6th, the House voted to override Governor Rauner's veto of the Senate budget plan, and Illinois had its first budget in more than 2 years. First, we'll attend the Senate discussion from July 4th on whether to override the governor's veto of their budget plan for fiscal year 2018, and then in about 40 minutes from now, we'll head to the House floor as Republican lawmakers debate over whether to override the governor's veto of the Senate state budget plan. And finally, in about 1 hour and 30 minutes, we run an encore presentation of our interview with Sheila Weinberg, the founder and CEO of the Institute for Truth in Accounting, which examines state spending and budgeting issues. That's all just ahead, after a brief word from one of our advisory council members.
The Illinois Channel salutes our advisory council members, leaders in business, education, law, medicine, and other fields from across Illinois.
Hi, I'm Jason Leahy, Executive Director of the Illinois Principals Association. Education has never been more challenging in Illinois than it is right now, with comprehensive education reform recently passed by lawmakers and our state's financing of education remaining under pressure. That's why the Illinois Principals Association acts to represent the needs of students and our members. We keep our principals up to date on changes in the law affecting education policy, and we advocate to keep our schools safe and to maintain a healthy environment conducive to learning. With all the changes happening in every field and with the ongoing financial problems facing Illinois, it's vital we all know about changes affecting our lives. That's why the Illinois Principals Association is proud to be a part of the Illinois Channel's advisory on education. Their coverage, whether that of key lawmakers discussing changes in education, an interview with the Illinois Budget Director on the state's finances, or the one-on-one interviews with those working in education, all help to keep citizens across the state connected to the real issues that impact the education of our children. I'm Jason Leahy, Executive Director of the Illinois Principals Association. I'm also proud to say I serve on the Illinois Channel's Advisory Council. The Illinois Channel, it works for all of us.
Just ahead, on July 6th, the House voted to override Governor Rauner's veto of the Senate budget plan, and Illinois had its first budget in more than 2 years. We'll attend the Senate discussion from July 4th on whether to override the governor's veto of their budget plan for fiscal year 2018. This runs about 35 minutes.
We're still on supplemental calendar number 1. Secretary's desk. Resolutions. House Joint Resolution 54. Senator Morrison indicates you wish to proceed. Mr. Secretary, read the resolution.
House Joint Resolution 54, offered by Senator Morrison.
Senator Morrison.
Mr. President, members of the Senate, this resolution urges the establishment of a joint legislative cancer caucus to discuss and evaluate public policies affecting cancer research, treatment, education. Today, in honor of our colleagues, our family members, and our friends who have suffered from cancer, please let us join together in this important measure to be both advocates and educators in this important area. I ask for an aye vote.
Is there any discussion? There being none, the question is, shall House Joint Resolution 54 pass? All those in favor will say aye, opposed nay. The ayes have it, and the resolution is adopted. So now proceed to the calendar, page 22. House Joint Resolution 36. Senator Lightford. Mr. Secretary, read the resolution.
House Joint Resolution 36, offered by Senator Lightford.
Leader Lightford.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, House Joint Resolution 36 allows for the Interstate 55 from the Tri-State Tollway to the South Marker 202 near Pontiac to reflect the Barack Obama President Expressway. President Obama was elected president in 2008 with just under 53% of the popular vote. He was reelected in 2012. He served as the 44th President of the United States of America from January 20th, 2009 to January 20th of 2017. He was the first African American elected to the American presidency and the first president born out of the continental United States. President Obama represented the 13th Senate District in the Illinois Senate from 1997 to 2004. He was elected to represent Illinois in the United States Senate in 2004 with over 70% of the vote. As president, he was a progressive leader on numerous issues, including domestic policy, the LGBTQ rights, women's rights, health care, economic policy, environmental policy, energy, gun control, internet policy, and foreign policy. I'd ask for an aye vote and be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Is there any discussion? There being none, as this resolution requires the expenditure of state funds, a roll call vote will be required. The voting is open. Have all voted who wish? Have all voted a wish? Have all voted a wish? Take the record. On that question, there are 49 voting ayes, 0 voting nays, 0 voting present. House Joint Resolution 36, having received the required constitutional majority, is declared passed. House Joint Resolution 46, Leader Lightford. Mr. Secretary, read the resolution.
House Joint Resolution 46, offered by Senator Lightford.
Senator Lightford.
Thank you again, Mr. President, and ladies and gentlemen of the Senate. House Joint Resolution 46 designates the portion of Roosevelt Road from Cicero Avenue to the Austin Avenue in Chicago as the Muhammad Ali Road. This is an initiative of State Representative Ford that he and I share a part of our district. Muhammad Ali was well known to travel to this area, and he does have family here. He was an American boxer and activist. He was born in Louisville, Kentucky on January 17th of 1942. Muhammad Ali became an Olympic gold medalist in 1960 and the world heavyweight boxing champion in 1964. Following his suspension from refusing military service, Ali reclaimed the heavyweight title 2 more times during the 1970s, winning famed bouts against Joe Frazier and George Foreman along the way. Muhammad Ali was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease in 1984. Ali devoted much of his time to philanthropy, earning the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2005. He died on June 3rd of 2016 in Phoenix, Arizona. His family, 2 of his daughters attended Western Illinois University when I was a student there, so they are actually leathernecks from one of our very own universities, and his family is looking forward to joining in on this celebration. I'd be happy to answer questions, and I ask for an aye vote.
Is there any discussion? There being none, as this resolution requires the expenditure of state funds, a roll call vote will be required. The voting is open. Have all voted a wish? Have all voted a wish? Have all voted a wish? Take the record. On that question, there are 50 voting ayes, 0 voting nays, 0 voting present. House Joint Resolution 46, having received the required constitutional majority, is declared passed. On page 23 of the calendar, concurrences, Senate Bill 60. Leader Link. Mr. Secretary, read the motion.
I move to concur with the House in the adoption of their Amendments 1 and 2 to Senate Bill 60, signed by Senator Link.
Senator Link.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill has several changes of the Township Code dealing with rates charged to users of waterworks and sewer systems. The amendment, House amendment made it changes only to the township of a population of 31,000, 32,000. It's the only township in the state that faces this problem. There is no known opposition to this because of this being the only township, and it passed with 75 votes in the House.
Is there any discussion? There being none, the question is, shall the Senate concur in House Amendments 1 and 2 to Senate Bill 60? All those in favor vote aye. Opposed, nay. The voting is open. Have all voted a wish? Have all voted a wish? Have all voted a wish? Take the record. On that question, there are 50 voting aye, 0 voting nay, 0 voting present. Senate Bill 60, having received the required constitutional majority, Senate does concur in House Amendments 1 and 2 to Senate Bill 60. The bill is declared passed. Senate Bill 1905. Leader Silverstein, Mr. Secretary, read the bill. Concurrence.
I move to concur with the House in the adoption of their Amendment Number 1 to Senate Bill 1905, signed by Senator Silverstein.
Senator Silverstein.
Mr. President, this removes the immediate effective date of the bill. That's all the amendment does.
Is there any discussion? There being none, Senator Nybo, for what purpose do you seek recognition?
Will the sponsor yield, Mr. President?
Sponsor indicates he will yield.
I'm sorry, Senator. My computer was stalled there for a second, and it's still loading up. Can you just give me a brief explanation of the concurrence and what the underlying bill does?
Senator Silverstein.
We've debated the bill already on third reading. The amendment just removes the effective date of the bill as passed by the Senate.
Senator Nybo.
Thank you, Senator Silverstein. So this is a bill that a lot of us voted no before, and we had an extended argument on that?
Senator Silverstein.
Whatever your screen says. I don't know what your screen looks like.
Senator Nybo.
To the bill?
The bill.
I would just encourage a no vote.
Senator Silverstein to close. The question is, shall the Senate concur in House Amendments 1 to Senate Bill 1905? All those in favor will vote aye. Opposed, nay. The voting is open. Have all voted a wish? Have all voted a wish? Have all voted a wish? Take the record. On that question, there are 40 voting aye, 13 voting nay, 0 voting present. Senate Bill 1905, having received the required constitutional majority, the Senate does concur in House Amendments 1 to Senate Bill 1905, and the bill is declared passed. Andrew Rutherford, WICS and WRSP request permission to video. If there be no objection, leave is granted. On page 20 of the calendar, 1955, Senator Althoff seeks leave of the body to return House Bill 1955 to the order of second reading. Leave is granted. On the order of second reading is House Bill 1955. Mr. Secretary, are there any floor amendments approved for consideration?
Yes, Mr. President, floor amendment number 1 offered by Senator Altoff.
Senator Altoff.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. The amendment becomes the bill, and I'll explain it on third reading, please.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor will say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the amendment is adopted. Are there any further floor amendments approved for consideration?
No further amendments reported.
Third reading. On the order of third reading, Mr. Secretary, read the bill.
Bill 1955, an act concerning regulation. Third reading of the bill.
Senator Alton.
Thank you again, Mr. President, and I truly thank the body for their courtesy and letting this trailer bill move forward. This is the trailer bill that was promised with Senate Bill 1417, which created the e-waste program. We indicated that there were still some outstanding concerns which we didn't feel were important, but obviously many others did. So working with the recyclers, the collection sites, counties, waste haulers, IRMA, IMA, CTA, EPA, and my joke in committee was PAM, but that was me. We actually did give the fixes that were required. I certainly can take some time and run through them, but as far as I am aware, there are no opponents. Again, I thank all of you in the body that were helpful in making this move forward. Specifically my friends from Lake County, as well as Senator Kaler, who is the chairman of the Environmental Committee, and I would just ask for an aye vote and get this over to the House.
Is there any discussion? There being none, the question is, shall House Bill 1955 pass? All those in favor will vote aye. Opposed, nay. The voting is open. Have all voted a wish? Have all voted a wish? Have all voted a wish? Take the record. On that question, there are 54 voting aye, 0 voting nay, 0 voting present. House Bill 1955, having received the required constitutional majority, is declared passed. Senator Altoff, for what purpose do you seek recognition?
Thank you. I was remiss. The most important people that were utilized and needed during the trailer bill were staff. And Nina is not here with us any longer, but she was absolutely crucial. And a nice round of applause for my staffer, Elliot, who actually made all of these people come together on days when they didn't want to even look at each other. So, Elliot, thank you very much.
Secretary, communications from the Secretary of State.
Letter dated July 4th, 2017, to the Honorable President of the Senate, in compliance with the provisions of the Constitution of the State of Illinois. I am forwarding herewith the enclosed Senate bills from the 100th General Assembly, as vetoed by the Governor, together with his objections. Senate Bills 6, 9, and 42. Respectfully, Jesse White, Secretary of State.
Mr. Secretary, do you have any veto motions in writing?
I have a motion to override total veto from Senator Staines on Senate Bill 6, a motion to override total veto on Senate Bill 9 from Senator Hutchinson, and a motion to override total veto on Senate Bill 42 from Senator Trotter.
Mr. Secretary, print those on the calendar, please. Supplemental calendar number 2 has been printed, and it is being distributed now. Supplemental calendar number 2, motions in writing, override, total vetoes, Senate bills. Senate Bill 9, Senator Hutchinson. Mr. Secretary, read the motion.
I move that Senate Bill 9 do pass, notwithstanding the veto of the Governor, signed by Senator Hutchinson.
Senator Hutchinson.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the body. And actually, thank you to the Governor for making sure that this wasn't long and drawn out so that we could do what everybody expected today, considering where folks' convictions lie as it relates to this. So we formally moved to override this veto motion to make sure that when the markets open tomorrow, that we are not the first state in the history of the United States to reach junk status. That's one thing I think all of us can agree on. That's not a good outcome for any of us. So on this day, after we've had the debate, I ask my colleagues to let the intention of the legislature stand and override this veto motion.
Is there any discussion? Senator Brady, for what purpose do you seek recognition?
The motion.
For the motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's been rather a long day, ladies and gentlemen, and I rise in opposition to this motion and the same motions on the package of bills that we discussed earlier. I do that with full respect of the intentions of those who supported these measures and the packages earlier today. But I continue to believe we're missing an opportunity. I hope that we pick up that opportunity after today and can provide a comprehensive package that moves us forward. But in as much as this doesn't meet that criteria, I believe we should oppose it and hope for a better package. I urge a no vote on this motion and the motions that will be following this. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? There being none, Senator Hutchinson to close.
Thank you, everybody. I just want to remind you, tomorrow is today. We don't have tomorrow. Thank you.
The question is, shall Senate Bill 9 pass, notwithstanding the veto of the governor? All those in favor will vote aye. Opposed, nay. The voting is open. Have all voted a wish? Have all voted a wish? Have all voted a wish? Take the record. On that question, there are 36 voting aye, 19 voting nay, 0 voting present. Senate Bill 9, having received the required 3/5 majority, is declared passed, notwithstanding the veto of the governor. Senate Bill 42. Senator Trotter. Mr. Secretary, read the motion.
I move that Senate Bill 6 do pass, notwithstanding the veto of the governor. I move that Senate Bill 42 do pass, notwithstanding the veto of the governor, signed by Senator Trotter.
Senator Trotter.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, members of the Senate. This is the budget implementation bill, which basically puts into writing and words what we have done with the other previous appropriation bills. So it certainly gives service, talks about the social service providers, fund transfers, direct deposits, tax receipts. It gives detailed information on our bonding and debt issuance, on our pensions, and other budgetary items. And I ask for an aye vote.
Is there any discussion? Senator Haynes, for what purpose do you seek recognition?
Yes, but we all do honor Senator Haynes today. A question of the sponsor.
Sponsor indicates he will yield.
For purposes of legislative intent, are these new bonds authorized by Section 7.6 of the General Obligation Bond Act intended to be repaid on a level principal repayment schedule, as is consistent with Section 9 of the General Obligation Bond Act?
Senator Trotter.
Yes, Senator Staines, it does. This bill provides no exemptions from the level principal repayment schedule as provided in Section 9 of the General Obligation Bond Act.
Is there any other discussion? Senator Trotter to close.
I just asked for an aye vote.
The question is, shall Senate Bill 42 pass, notwithstanding the veto of the governor? All those in favor will vote aye. Opposed, nay. The voting is open. Have all voted a wish? Have all voted a wish? Have all voted a wish? Take the record. On that question, there are 36 voting aye, 18 voting nay, 0 voting present. Senate Bill 42, having received the required 3/5 majority, is declared passed, notwithstanding the veto of the governor. Senate Bill 6. Mr. Secretary, read the motion.
I move that Senate Bill 6 do pass, notwithstanding the veto of the governor, signed by Senator Staines.
Senator Staines.
Yes, this is the appropriation bill to finish fiscal year 17 as well as fiscal year 18. It's part of the package that finally provides fiscal stability to the state of Illinois. I urge, while I agree with the senator from Bloomington that there's more work to be done, I believe we can continue to do that in a bipartisan fashion, but we should not do that at the harm of not providing fiscal stability for the state of Illinois. I urge an aye vote.
Is there any discussion? There being none, the question is, shall Senate Bill 6 pass, notwithstanding the veto of the governor? All those in favor will vote aye, opposed nay. The voting is open. Have all voted a wish? Have all voted a wish? Have all voted a wish? Take the record. On that question, there are 39 voting aye, 15 voting nay, 0 voting present. Senate Bill 6, having received the required 3/5 majority, is declared passed, notwithstanding the veto of the governor. President Cullerton, for what purpose do you seek recognition?
Claiborne first, please.
Leader Claiborne.
My button didn't work that time, so I'd like the record to reflect that I would have voted aye for the last bill.
Record will reflect an aye vote. Cullerton.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to thank the senators for their patience today and for their hard work. We passed a bipartisan balanced budget for the first time in a couple of years. I look forward to continuing to work with you. I can't tell you when we will be coming back, but a lot of things depend on what happens in the House. But we will continue to try to enact and put on the governor's desk many of the reforms that he's asked for. And I'm certainly disappointed that he vetoed a balanced budget, but I'm glad that we were able to override him. And I would thank all of you for being here on the 4th of July. Last time I did this was 1985. I don't want to make it a habit, so maybe next year. The governor's got about 7 months to present his balanced budget. I look forward to hearing from him. Thank you.
We will now proceed to the order of resolutions consent calendar. With leave of the body, all those resolutions read in today will be added to the consent calendar. Mr. Secretary, have there been any objections filed to any resolution on the consent calendar?
No objections filed, Mr. President.
Is there any discussion? If not, the question is, shall the resolutions on the consent calendar be adopted? All those in favor will say aye, opposed nay. The ayes have it. The motion carries and the resolutions are adopted. Mr. Secretary, resolutions.
Senate Joint Resolution 46, offered by President Cullerton.
And the order of resolutions is Senate Joint Resolution 46. Mr. Secretary, read the resolution.
Senate Joint Resolution 46, offered by President Cullerton, resolved by the Senate of the 100th General Assembly of the State of Illinois, the House of Representatives concurring herein, that when the Senate adjourns regular session, as well as special sessions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, the Senate shall remain in continuous session, and it stands adjourned until the call of the President. And when the House of Representatives adjourns regular session, as well as special session 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, the House of Representatives shall remain in continuous session, and it stands adjourned until the call of the Speaker.
President Cullerton moves to suspend the rules for the purpose of immediate consideration and the adoption of Senate Joint Resolution 46. All those in favor will say aye, opposed nay. The ayes have it, and the rules are suspended. President Cullerton moves the adoption of Senate Joint Resolution 46. All in favor will say aye, opposed nay. The ayes have it, and the resolution is adopted. The first special session of the Senate of 100 General Assembly will please come to order. Mr. Secretary, reading and approval of the journal.
Senate Journal of Monday, July 3rd, 2017.
Senator Hunter.
Drive careful. You ready to go home now? Yeah.
Senator Hunter.
As soon as I do this.
Senator Hunter.
Mr. President, I move to postpone the reading and approval of the journal just read by the Secretary pending arrival of the printed transcript.
Senator Hunter moves to postpone the reading and the approval of the journal pending the arrival of printed transcript. There being no objection, so ordered. There being no further business to come before the first special session pursuant to the Senate Joint Resolution 46, the first special session of the Senate stands adjourned to the call of the President. The first special session of the Senate stands adjourned. The second special session of the Senate, the 100 General Assembly, will please come to order. Mr. Secretary, reading and approval of the journal.
Senate Journal of Monday, July 3rd, 2017.
Senator Hunter.
Mr. President, I move to postpone the reading and approval of the journal just read by the Secretary pending arrival of the printed transcript.
Senator Hunter moves to postpone the reading and the approval of the journal pending arrival of the printed transcripts. There being no objection, so ordered. There being no further business to come before the second special session, pursuant to the Senate Joint Resolution 46, the second special session of the Senate stands adjourned to the call of the President. The second special session of the Senate stands adjourned. The third special session of the Senate of the 100 General Assembly will please come to order. Mr. Secretary, reading and the approval of the journal.
Senate Journal of Monday, July 3rd, 2017.
Senator Hunter.
Mr. President, I move to postpone the reading and approval of the journal just read by the Secretary pending arrival of the printed transcript.
Senator Hunter moves to postpone the reading and the approval of the journal pending the arrival of the printed transcript. There being no objection, so ordered. Being no further business to come before the third special session, pursuant to the Senate Joint Resolution 46, the third special session of the Senate stands adjourned to the call of the President. The third special session of the Senate stands adjourned. The fourth special session of the Senate of the 100 General Assembly will please come to order. Mr. Secretary, reading in the approval of the journal.
Senate Journal of Monday, July 3rd, 2017.
Senator Hunter.
Mr. President, I move to postpone the reading and approval of the journal just read by the Secretary pending arrival of the printed transcript.
Senator Hunter moves to postpone the reading and the approval of the journal pending the arrival of printed transcript. There being no objection, so ordered. There being no further business to come before the fourth special session, pursuant to the Senate Joint Resolution 46, the fourth special session of the Senate stands adjourned to the call of the President. The fourth special session of the Senate stands adjourned. The fifth special session of the Senate, the 100 General Assembly, will please come to order. Mr. Secretary, reading in the approval of the journal.
Senate Journal of Monday, July 3rd, 2017.
Senator Hunter.
Mr. President, I move to postpone the reading and approval of the journal just read by the Secretary pending arrival of the printed transcript.
Senator Hunter moves to postpone the reading and the approval of the journal pending the arrival of printed transcript. There being no objection, so ordered. There being no further business to come before the fifth special session pursuant to the Senate Joint Resolution 46, the fifth special session of the Senate stands adjourned to the call of the President. The fifth special session of the Senate stands adjourned. The sixth special session of the Senate of the 100 General Assembly will please come to order. Mr. Secretary, reading in the approval of the journal.
Senate Journal of Monday, July 3rd, 2017.
Senator Hunter.
Mr. President, I move to postpone the reading and approval of the journal just read by the Secretary pending arrival of the printed transcript.
Senator Hunter moves to postpone the reading and the approval of the journal pending the arrival of printed transcript. There being no objection, so ordered. There being no further business to come before the sixth special session pursuant to the Senate Joint Resolution 46, the sixth special session of the Senate stands adjourned to the call of the President. The sixth special session of the Senate stands adjourned. The seventh special session of the Senate of the 100th General Assembly will please come to order. Mr. Secretary, reading and the approval of the journal.
Senate Journal of Monday, July 3rd, 2017.
Senator Hunter.
Mr. President, I move to postpone the reading and approval of the journal just read by the Secretary pending arrival of the printed transcript.
Senator Hunter moves to postpone the reading and the approval of the journal pending the arrival of the printed transcript. There being no objection, so ordered. There being no further business to come before the seventh special session pursuant to the Senate Joint Resolution 46, the seventh special session of the Senate stands adjourned to the call of the President. The seventh special session of the Senate stands adjourned. The eighth special session of the Senate of the 100th General Assembly will please come to order. Mr. Secretary, reading and the approval of the journal.
Senate Journal of Monday, July 3rd, 2017.
Senator Hunter.
Mr. President, I move to postpone the reading and approval of the journal just read by the Secretary pending arrival of the printed transcript.
Senator Hunter moves to postpone the reading and the approval of the journal pending the arrival of printed transcript. There being no objection, so ordered. There being no further business to come before the eighth special session pursuant to the Senate Joint Resolution 46, eighth special session of the Senate stands adjourned to the call of the President. The eighth special session of the Senate stands adjourned. The ninth special session of the Senate of the 100th General Assembly will please come to order. Mr. Secretary, reading and approval of the journal.
Senate Journal of Monday, July 3rd, 2017.
Senator Hunter.
Mr. President, I move to postpone the reading and approval of the journal just read by the Secretary pending arrival of the printed transcript.
Senator Hunter moves to postpone the reading and the approval of the journal pending the arrival of the printed transcript. There being no objection, so ordered. There being no further business to come before the ninth special session pursuant to Senate Joint Resolution 46, the ninth special session of the Senate stands adjourned to the call of the President. The ninth special session of the Senate stands adjourned. The 10th special session of the Senate of the 100th General Assembly will please come to order. Mr. Secretary, reading and the approval of the journal.
Senate Journal of Monday, July 3rd, 2017.
Senator Hunter.
Mr. President, I move to postpone the reading and approval of the journal just read by the Secretary pending arrival of the printed transcript.
Senator Hunter moves to postpone the reading and the approval of the journal pending the arrival of printed transcript. There being no objection, so ordered. There being no further business to come before the 10th special session pursuant to Senate Joint Resolution 46, the 10th special session of the Senate stands adjourned to the call of the President. The 10th special session of the Senate stands adjourned. Regular session will now come to order. I want to wish everyone a happy 4th of July. Safe travels if you're going home today. There being no further business to come before the Senate, pursuant to the Senate Joint Resolution 46, the Senate stands adjourned until the call of the Senate President. The Senate stands adjourned.
You're watching the Illinois Channel, an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois.
Next, from Springfield, we'll head to the House floor as Republican lawmakers debate over whether to override the governor's veto of the Senate state budget plan. This runs about 1 hour.
Mr. Clerk, Mr. Davis on the motion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House concur with the Senate and that Senate Bill 9 do pass, notwithstanding the governor's veto.
Mr. McSweeney.
Mr. Speaker, to the motion. This is a very important day for the state of Illinois.
We're going to decide, are we going to continue the status quo, or are we going to change? 47% of the people in a poll before the crisis say they want to leave the state of Illinois. 115,000 people left, and I think a lot of that has to do with high taxes and high property taxes in this state. The thing that really interests me is that we have a whole bunch of rating agency experts here in the chamber, it seems. People believe that they know what's going to happen, and it's very simple. The rating agencies look at one thing, the ability to pay back the debt. They don't care if you raise taxes. They don't care if you cut spending. In fact, they would actually prefer, though, you cut spending because there's more certainty. We see what's happened in states like Connecticut. When you raise taxes, you actually reduce the economic output of those states, and you ultimately bring about less revenue. And what we're seeing now is that if we pass this tax increase, Moody's is telling us that we're going to junk. They're giving us a roadmap that this state is going to junk because this budget is full of blue smokes and mirrors, and this budget is not going to accomplish the fundamental reform. It's not going to change pensions. It's not going to change Medicaid. What we do know for sure is that this budget is going to hurt people. We've all heard from our constituents. They're wondering how they're going to pay their high property taxes. They're wondering how they're going to pay their living expenses because we're raising their income tax rate by 32%. And what do we get? Nothing. Nothing. We get nothing but more taxes, more of the status quo. There's an alternative. We could stay here. We could do our job. We could adopt pro-growth economic policies. We could make Illinois a state that people want to stay in. So I ask everyone to please do the right thing, stand up for the taxpayers of this state, and vote no for this tax increase.
Mr. Anderson for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the motion. I appreciate the previous speaker's comments, especially the comment that this is a historic day for the state. I believe it's a historic day because it's a day where we decide the fate of our state. Do we want to save it, or do we want to let it go into meltdown? I think that is sincerely the options that we faced. Now, since about, I lost track of the day, since Sunday, I think, when we took the original vote, it's been kind of brutal for me. Hate mail, death threats, my personal cell phone being given out. It's been tough. But you know what I reflected on, what I thought about? Was the last 2.5 years of people suffering because we can't get past impasse. So if I have to take a couple of days of that, I will be happy to do so, because I'm thinking about those people, the people who are most needy, who are most vulnerable, the autism funding, the members of the mental health community, the developmentally disabled, the at-risk youth, our higher education system, our education system. They have been suffering far longer and far worse than I ever have. So if I have to take those slings and arrows for a while to help them, I gladly will. Now, what you've heard today, of course, or yesterday, is that Moody's has indicated that they might downgrade us. They have not indicated that they will. They have indicated that they might. And two of the things that they said would be important in that are, one, our ability to pay our back bills. Representative Harris, Greg Harris, went through that process and explained that that is a part of the bill. When they review it in more detail, I'm confident they will see that. And there's also money to improve our pensions there. Are we done? No, we're not done, but we're moving in the right direction. But the most interesting thing I learned from the Moody's report was the characterization that their concern was the lack of bipartisan support in this Capitol. Who knew that the old kindergarten checkbox of plays well with each other would affect our bond rating? And that's the reality, ladies and gentlemen. The lack of bipartisanship, the bitter infighting that we've been experiencing for 2.5 years, this impasse has affected our bond rating like nothing before. So let me tell you, I've said it before, I'll say it again, impasse politics do not work. They do not work for the state of Illinois. They have never worked. So, Mr. Speaker, Governor, I implore you, we need to work together to get this done. And we have to do that now. Now we have a budget in front of us. And don't forget what happens if we don't pass it. It's not just the certainty of the bond downgrade, because that's what's going to happen if you vote no. We're also out of money. The comptroller has told us we're out of cash. Our state employees are going to get laid off. We're going to have disaccreditation of our universities. Our bonds are going to default. We are going into free fall if we don't do this. So for those of you who say there's a better option, great. Do you have the votes? You do not have the votes. Our options are this or financial meltdown. So my ask is that we vote for this, that we give our state a chance, and that we continue to work on the reforms. I believe that this side is ready to work, and I also believe that your side is ready to work, to continue to develop those reforms to make the state great. So in the end, I want to start where I was about a week ago, which is I asked for all of us together to save the state. But more importantly, we have to save it together, because now everyone has told us that's the only way it's going to get done. Thank you very much.
Mr. Morrison for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the motion. This is a historic day here in the state, and I've, like you, talked to a lot of constituents lately, and what they are demanding is reforms. They've had enough. It's true that if you compare the income tax rates in states around us, if you look at just that silo, sure, you could say that Illinois' flat rate will still be competitive. But that's not the only thing that our constituents are looking at. That's not the only thing that businesses look at. When you look at a high property tax, and that without reforms will just continue to climb. My district is in Cook County. For many of you, you live and your constituents are in Cook County. It's just more and more and more. And while certainly we do need a budget, and yes, people do want predictability, but you know what they're getting? They're getting another predictable outcome. When the state of Illinois and all of our local governments run out of money, what do? Go back to the well, go back to the taxpayers, squeeze a little more, squeeze a little harder, and we all know it. We're squeezing so hard, we're squeezing them out. We're reducing our base of taxpayers, which means if this passes, we go right back to them again. Who knows, a month from now, 6 months from now, a year from now? It's not going to solve our problems unless we address the fundamental reforms. In the Wall Street Journal this morning, there was a great commentary. America once led the world on tax reform. It concludes this way. Lower tax rates do not guarantee economic growth, but they help. So we're doing the opposite. And it will hurt. We're taking more money out of the private economy and allowing the public sector to grow. We cannot have a healthy state. We can't even have healthy government if you're squeezing out the entities that actually provide the tax revenue. We can thrive again as a state, but we have to do things differently. This is the wrong path. I urge you to vote no.
Mr. Fortner for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Speaker. To the motion. We've had a budget impasse now for over 2 years, and I thought, since we are looking at a set of probably 3 votes that together make up the package for the 2018 budget before us, that it's worth putting in context what those numbers are and ask 2 questions. Is it an appropriate, fair budget for where we should be today? And does it balance based on what it means to have a balanced budget? I'm going to take up the second one first, because so often we hear about how we fail to balance our budget year after year. And we have certainly put forward some unbalanced budgets over the years, admittedly so at the times they were done. But there have also been balanced budgets by what it means to be a budget. A budget is a prospective document, not a retrospective document. So if at the end of the day, when you do your audit report, it says it didn't line up, yes, it wasn't balanced, but none of us have the kind of crystal ball to know that in advance. So we have to ask, is it balanced based on what is going forward for 2018? And yes, in the appropriation bill, SB 6, that we may see an override motion for as well, in that bill, there are appropriations appropriate to fiscal 2017. Over $1 billion of those. Those are for services that have been rendered, and yes, they will be added to the stack of unpaid bills like so many of the other things that we have accumulated. Because we are accumulating at a rate of around $39 billion over the last year, due to a combination of what we have to spend, court orders, constitutionally required payments. They add up. Yet we're taking in, I would have thought, about $32 billion, though we just saw a report from COGFA today. That number is probably even less in terms of what we took in. That's a big gap. So now let me turn to the budget before us for 2018. In that document, to try and get a handle on it, back in April, I spent my Easter recess trying to pour through some spreadsheets with the help of our very expert staff on this side, using numbers from COGFA, the group that we rely on to put together numbers, using numbers from the Governor's Office of Management and Budget. I went through and looked at the different spending plans that had been out there, and what I found was that where we probably should be, if I took the last time the four caucuses came together on agreement, which was in May of 2012, and project that forward, the number you get is $36.3 billion for fiscal 18. What we have here is $36.1 billion, which is certainly, it's actually under the number I would have predicted, but it's certainly very close to that, and more importantly is well below the $39 billion we are spending at. Furthermore, the revenue, the motion we are considering at this point, exceeds that budget by a few $100 million, and that's important because we need to be addressing the $15+ billion of back bills we have accumulated. And having some additional revenue is necessary, because there's otherwise, all we would do is we would just manage the cash flow but do nothing for the back bills. We have to have that extra revenue. It's the only way to start moving down on the back bills as well. And between what we have in the BIMP bill, what we have in the revenue bill, the pieces are there. Are they as much as I'd like to see things paid down? No. But they're what we have that brings 2018 into balance. With my last little bit of time, let me talk about reforms, because I would certainly agree there aren't as many reforms out here right now as I would like to see. Things like workers' compensation, things like the property tax system. We need to address those. But that doesn't diminish some of the reforms that we have worked on, parts dealing with procurement, some of the local government work that has passed and moved forward. There are real reforms that have gone forward, and I certainly hope that everyone in this chamber will continue working, and let's wrap up based on a lot of good negotiation that has gone forward and get those other pieces done as well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Wheeler, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the motion. There's been intense concern raised in the last few days about the potential for the downgrading of our state's bonds to junk status and the dramatic and lasting consequences that would bring. And it should really disappoint all Illinoisans that the General Assembly did not do its job and send a budget along with substantial reforms to the governor's desk back in May to avoid this potential catastrophe. Instead, a budget and tax items were sent to the governor's desk that everyone knew was going to get vetoed. And even with that tax and spending plan that passed, it still may not convince Moody's from downgrading the state of Illinois bonds to junk status, even with a budget in place. So rewind for a second back to my remarks on the floor just a few days ago. Before the tax increase passed, I said the bond houses that we all of a sudden care about they aren't going to see any change in our pension costs because we aren't actually addressing pension reform. So it shocked me when I read the Moody's statement yesterday when it says, so far, the plan appears to lack concrete measures that will materially improve Illinois' long-term capacity to address its unfunded pension liabilities. Seriously, people, nobody's making this up. This is real, and it's in front of us. Moody's believes that the state has $251 billion in unfunded pension liabilities. And without substantive pension reform, Illinois won't be able to afford that debt. This isn't a political statement. This is actual, real stuff right in front of us again. And just so we're all clear, this is not new. Moody's been telling us for a long time that Illinois is on the wrong financial track. In 1973, Moody's gave Illinois a AAA rating right out of the gate. Then in 1991 through 2013, we were downgraded 11 times. We've been downgraded 3 more times since 2015, including one time just last month. That's all real, and we knew it, and we're still running things this way. That's why the governor and many of the Republicans on my side here have been fighting for reforms to change the trajectory of our state's horrible finances. My friends on the other side of the aisle keep saying, oh, the reforms are either on the governor's desk or they're on their way. But I'm sorry to inform you guys, those lipstick reforms won't cut it. We can't just accept watered-down bills that will have minimal savings or virtually no impact just because we're calling them reforms. Concrete reforms with real savings are required and long overdue to save Illinois. So for 2.5 years, we've been working on these reforms, real reforms. But we can't keep stalling and passing reforms in name only that won't actually change the status quo. It's time for us to get real. It's time for us to get to work and get these reforms into actual statute. This is what the General Assembly should have done, and we could have done, back in the spring of 2015 when we all got together for the first time. Reforms first. They change how we do our budget, then we can actually sit down and get a real budget done. And here we are doing things in the wrong order again. And I'll put it out there because I have to, maybe someday in my tenure down here, we'll actually start with the first step first, and we'll actually do a revenue estimate. Thank you.
Mr. Skillicorn for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So there's a lot of talk of this Moody's and what they wrote, and they just don't sound very impressed with what we did here. And unfortunately, we passed a massive tax hike, and we passed this budget. And if you look at that letter, it still appears that a credit downgrade is looming over our great state. This budget is junk. Let me read a quick note from someone in King County. And he says, I'm already being forced to sell my house that I so desperately want to keep. I already canceled phone and TV service to cover these past increases. Maybe they propose I stop volunteering for Boy Scouts and other charities so I can pick up a second job. I'd love to know what they think. That's the reality that people are thinking. And that person like me thinks that this budget is junk. Illinois currently has an unfunded pension liability of over $100 billion. This budget, these massive tax hikes, don't address that. 10 years ago, Governor Blagojevich shorted our pensions. This budget doesn't address that. 20 years ago, Governor Edgar refinanced our pensions. He called it the ramp. Today, our pension payments balloon every year after year after year. This budget doesn't address that. Ladies and gentlemen, this budget is junk. I urge a no vote so we can get back to work and work on the real compromise that had been started. A few days ago, negotiations stopped. I call for the continuation of that negotiation because I believe we're close. And I think that red and blue can be purple, and we can work something out, and we don't have to pass this along to the taxpayers of the state, and we can actually solve our problems. Thank you very much.
Mr. Phillips for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the bill, I've been sitting here listening to a lot of talk, and I wasn't going to speak, but there's a couple of things I wanted to point out. First of all, if I decide to press my button to override the governor, it doesn't make me any less a conservative Republican than the rest of the people that stand in here. It makes a person decide he has to vote for his district. He has to think about all the people in his district to the best of his ability. Now, whatever way I decide to go, I'll have to live with, and I certainly am tortured by it, I can guarantee you that. My district happens to border Indiana, which is a very competitive business district, and I hate to see more businesses run to Indiana. I'm every bit just as strong for business reforms, and I'd like to see us continue to work as everybody speaks to those business reforms. But I feel like we're in a juncture, 2.5 years into it, and $15 or $20 billion of unpaid bills that maybe at this particular point in time we're at a spot where we need to, stop, reform, and take some analysis of exactly where we're at. I have a secretary that works for me, and I was looking at her income. She makes $34,743 a year. Her actual income tax rate for the state of Illinois is 2.7. Now you ask why and how could she get 2.7 when it's actually 3.75 in the state of Illinois, but with the deductions that she currently has, it ends up she pays 2.7%. So I filled out her tax reform underneath this new 4.95% and tried to figure out exactly where would her tax rate be. And the reality of it is she's going to raise it by 0.0086%, less than 1% of the 1.25. So it's less than the 32% based on the deductions that she'll be able to take as a single mother, 2 children, and so on and so forth. So, we can spend it any way we want to. It's going to cost her $4 or $5.70 some cents more a week, and I don't like her having to pay $5.74 a week. And we'll try to work with my employees to see if we can't do something better for them, and I think that's what we're all going to have to try to do. But the reality of the spin this as if it's some huge, massive, crazy going to drive people into the ground, I think is a little bit hysterical, and maybe we should calm down, take a look at it. I think, and I'm hoping, and that's where the prayer comes in, that maybe after this, we can really truly work on some reforms for businesses, because I think both sides understand without bringing in new people and increasing new jobs, this state is going to go in a direction that none of us really want. So I implore all of us to work towards that end. The politicalness has to come to a stop. Transparency needs to be more open. And I wish us all the best when we get through all this. Thank you.
Mr. DeLuca for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the sponsor yield?
Sponsor yield. Okay,
Representative Davis, if you can answer this, or whoever has to answer it, if we're successful with the overrides today, the bipartisan budget working group, what is the intention moving forward?
It appears that we would continue to meet. I think members have talked about some of the other issues, whether budgetary or not, that need to be addressed, and I would like to think that our Republican colleagues will continue to gauge this side of the aisle. We will continue to meet to work through some of the other issues that both sides think are important.
Okay, that's good. I understand the reforms will continue to be worked on. I understand that, but I'm talking specifically on this budget, whether the conversation will continue on this budget.
Well, I guess what I would say is that this particular action obviously would override the governor's veto, which means that this budget would be enacted if that were indeed the case. So clearly budget is an ongoing conversation, so we start the dialogue for the next budget.
Okay, I just want to make sure that it doesn't get shut down, because clearly we've all heard from our constituents, and there's a real distrust with the taxpayers who are going to be sending us more of their money. And they want to be sure that if they're doing that, that we are going to be spending those dollars efficiently and effectively. And we want to make sure that the budget that we are approving today, that we already approved, that we're overriding today, that we continue to look at it. And that's what I'm asking for. I just want an assurance that the bipartisan budget working group will continue to work and look at the budget and make sure if there's any areas where there's duplication, where there's waste, where there might be spending on programs that would be considered not essential, that we continue to look at that.
I would agree that would certainly be our intent. Again, budget making process is an ongoing thing. So even in passing this particular budget, if we're successful, then yes, that conversation does continue.
Very good. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Representative Barbara Wheeler for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the bill. All of us are hearing from our constituents that they can't afford any more taxes. Illinois is a slow growth state right now. We are not competitive. Our people are hurting. Yet now we're asking a shrinking taxing base to pay more taxes, a lot more. And that is without real reforms that provide direct relief. So guess what happens? We're pushing people out the door. Indiana, in my border district, Wisconsin, Missouri, Iowa, Kentucky. I suspect strongly that there are many in this room who still do not believe that Illinois, the people of Illinois, are leaving the state. I believe it. You should believe it. We're doing the wrong thing here.
Mr. Brady for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. To the bill. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, many of you have been here for a lengthy period of time, such as myself, and you've seen a lot of things that cause you distress and a process that I think we would all agree upon needs a major overhaul. But I think for me, the focus of my vote today is going to be that I cannot be convinced that the priorities need to be set in this particular bill when it comes to our spending. Our priorities are public education, public infrastructure, public safety, and the most vulnerable. I'm not convinced that those dollars are going to go to those priorities in this budget. If you look at it, there's so many other places where dollars are going to go that simply we have no business funding. We've lost sight of our priorities. Thus, I will not be in favor of this bill today. I will not vote to override. Thank you.
Mr. Butler for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the motion. As I've debated in my mind how to cast my vote on this override, and I have struggled over the last several weeks with this. I've heard from many friends and advocates on both sides today's vote, but it's the stories I've heard from the citizens of the 87th District combined with my own family story that have underpinned my vote today. Over 2 centuries ago, my ancestors came to the Illinois Territory for economic opportunity. Today, my siblings have moved from this state because of our economic decline. On September 17, 1818, almost 199 years ago, a gentleman named Lewis Barker was elected the first state senator from Pope County. Barker served in the first 4 Illinois General Assemblies, helping to create the initial laws of our then brand new state. Senator Barker was my 4th great-grandfather. Barker's lineage runs through the years to me because of my mother, Harriet, and gives me the great privilege of bridging the 1st and 100th General Assemblies. My mother was born in Centralia, raised in the small Marshall County town of Lakin, attended the University of Illinois, and settled in Peoria to raise her 7 children. My parents' business was a small manufacturing company that was forced out of business under the weight of the 1980s Peoria recession. It was Harriet, actually, who was 51% owner of that business. My parents' 7 children, with our deep roots in the very foundation of the state, tell the current story of Illinois. My sister Kathy, raised in Peoria, educated at the University of Illinois, who worked for the city of Peoria and was an elected member of the Peoria Park District Board, has lived in Olympia, Washington, a state with no income tax, for the past 21 years, where she is now retired.
My brother Pat, raised in Peoria, who began his professional career working for my parents' business and was the one most likely to take over the company before it was driven out of business, has lived for many years in Kingston, Tennessee, a state with no tax on wages, where he is now retired. My brother Jim, raised in Peoria, educated at Western Illinois University and the University of Illinois, has now lived in Illinois most of his adult life and currently resides in Austin, Texas, a state with no income tax, where he is now retired. My brother Mike, raised in Peoria, a tremendous basketball player who has a standout careers for both Lincoln College and Eureka College, now makes his home in Milton, Wisconsin. My brother Tom, raised in Peoria and educated like me at Eastern Illinois University, lives in Suwanee, Georgia. His two sons, my nephews, have rarely set foot in the state of both their parents. The reason my siblings have left, that's pretty easy. Economic opportunities and states with lower overall tax burdens than Illinois. But it's my sister Sue, as my only sibling, who remains in our once proud state. She lives in the district of Mr. Worley. When I hear Grant talk about the enormous burden of property taxes in the 41st district, I know all too well what he means. My sister and brother-in-law will pay almost $14,000 this year in property taxes. $14,000. My sister has been very keen on following the happenings here since I've been in the House. She's by no means a right-wing ideologue. She has no extreme right-wing agenda. In fact, she's probably the most ardent anti-Trumper that I know. But as I've been updating her during the special session, including today, she's grown increasingly frustrated. After informing her of House passage of these bills a few days ago, she told me that maybe, just maybe, it's finally time for them to move out of state, my last sibling in Illinois. And today, I see President Cullerton's remarks that more taxes will be needed after approval of this bill. What am I supposed to tell my sister? Why do I tell you the history of my family? Because it is the story of Illinois up to this very moment. It is a story similar to many I hear throughout the 87th District, of families exiting our state for greener pastures. The representative from Arlington Heights, my friend that sits in front of me, gave a very impassioned defense of this bill the other day. I have a great deal of respect for him. And I agree with the point he made. I, too, was not sent to the Illinois House of Representatives to oversee the destruction of this great state. But my family's history is example A of the need not for incremental change in our state, but for monumental change in our state. Ladies and gentlemen, raising the taxes of our friends and neighbors by 32% without making monumental change to the way our state functions does not solve our problems. It only continues them. Today I stand facing the future of our state with fear that my family's over 2-century legacy in the land of our ancestors, a legacy that crosses the state from the Ohio to the Fox, from the Mississippi to the Wabash, spans every single day that Illinois has been a part of our union. Today I'm afraid that legacy will be snuffed out in the near future. Today, an override of these pieces of legislation will only add to the sins of General Assemblies over the past half-century. We continue to pass laws that drive people from our state, and with this override, we will contribute to my family's exodus from Illinois. I cannot, in good conscience, support that direction, and that is why I will be no.
Mr. Cabello for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, to the motion. As many of you know, I do not usually speak on any of the bills that come before us, whether for or against. But I feel strongly that I need to make sure that the people back home have their voices heard. And we can take inventory, we can talk and prove to everyone back home exactly what we have been lacking in this chamber. We've lacked doing our jobs. We have lacked meeting. We've canceled session days. We have not been here near enough as what we should be to do the right job. I'm hearing from everybody back home Do what you need to do, but do not raise my taxes. Maybe if we met, we could have done some priority spending. Maybe we could have prioritized the elderly, the children, and the disabled. Maybe we could have prioritized in a budget who gets what first. But no. The urgency wasn't there. We met sometimes for an hour. Negotiations were going on. I say BS. They were not. We have a job that we are supposed to do. We are honored enough to stand and sit in this chamber to make sure that all voices are heard. The taxpayers who pay for all this have not been heard. The will of the people want to make sure that our vulnerable are taken care of, but they want them to be taken care of first. I hope that everybody back home and everybody across this state will rise up. Let everyone in this chamber know exactly how they feel after this vote is taken. I hope that they let us know that they want us to prioritize this. They want us to repeal this after we do that prioritization. Ladies and gentlemen, there are good people on both sides of this aisle. I will not berate you for how you vote. But for God's sake, we've got to prioritize. We've got to make sure that we do our jobs in committee. As an appropriations chair, we used to have working groups. We don't have those working groups meet any longer. What the hell are we doing? We wait. We make sure that there's a manufactured crisis. Because we didn't do what we were supposed to earlier. How come we couldn't have come to this resolution a year ago? Because we didn't want to. We didn't meet. We canceled days. We didn't have our working groups. And now we're punishing the people that have to pay for it all. Ladies and gentlemen, you know that I will, along with a lot of others here on this side of the aisle and on that side of the aisle, will work together to find the compromise. Unfortunately, we didn't start early enough. So, ladies and gentlemen back home, please rise up, make sure you hold us accountable, and make sure your voices are heard.
David Harris for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, and I will be brief. We had a long discussion on Senate Bill 9 the other day. There's no joy here. There's no joy in voting for a gubernatorial override of veto. There's no joy in voting for a tax increase. There's no joy. But how long can this impasse go on? We understand where we are. We are looking into an abyss, a financial abyss. The state is imploding financially, and action is required. Now, I'm going to repeat just one thing I said the other day. We have $15 billion of debt. $15 billion of debt that has accumulated $800 million of interest, and just take that $800 million of interest, put it right down there in front of the clerk's well, and light a match to it. Because that's the benefit that the taxpayers' dollars are generating. $800 million, taxpayers' dollars that are generating no benefit to the taxpayers. The effects of all this are obvious to us. Look, 25,000 people are out of work because road projects have stopped. We've been thrown out of the multi-state lottery games, which, oh, by the way, generate $90 million a year in revenue to the state of Illinois. Can't sell those tickets because we don't have a budget. We've been kicked out. The institutions of higher learning are threatened to have their accreditation removed. Who's going to send their child to a university that doesn't even have accreditation? Those are some of the basic problems of not having a budget. And then we talk about the bond rating, and it's a very, very serious issue. And Moody's said they will evaluate based on what we do if we get a budget. They will evaluate over the next period of time. Fitch and Standard & Poor's has said they're just going to hold off. Moody's is going to evaluate and see if we make those other reforms that we've talked about. And you know what? The other side of the aisle has said they will work with us on those reforms, and I take them at the word because I believe them. We want them, they want them, we want to fix pensions, we want to fix property taxes, we want to fix workers' compensation, and we are close. Our leader has said that himself. We are close. We can do it. But if we don't have a budget, with virtual certainty, we will go to junk status. At least with a budget, we hold off, but without a budget, we go to junk status. Now look, we could go for the capital compromise that was put out on June the 14th, which includes a 4.95% income tax. It includes sales taxes on services. It includes a satellite TV tax. It includes gaming revenues, presumably from an expansion of gaming that would be expected to pass. You want to vote for that? Okay, you can vote for that. I'm not voting for that. I've got a choice here in front of me. And I will tell you, and let me address a brief remark to the governor. You are an astute, capable businessman. You understand the numbers here. You understand what the implications of junk bond status. Is that what we want for the fifth largest state in the union? I disagree. I disagree that we can wait any longer to get a budget in place, and I respect those who say otherwise. But I disagree with that. I honestly believe that it is now time to right this ship of state and provide some stability and order to what has been nothing but confusion and chaos. Let's change it. We have an opportunity right now. I hate to vote for an override, and I hate to vote for a tax increase, but in this instance, I believe it's the right vote. I recommend a yes.
Mr. Durkin, for 5 minutes.
Good afternoon. To the motion, ladies and gentlemen of the Illinois House of Representatives, and for all Illinoisans who are watching us today and listening in, is this the best that we can achieve? Is this the best that we can deliver? Is this the best we can accomplish for the some 13 million residents of the state of Illinois? We've heard about the different responsibilities and the obligations of the state. Yes, I understand that. But it should not always be predicated upon more taxpayer sacrifice. These votes will be over soon, and I will not be supporting the override motions today. I do ask this question: does today's vote reflect the desires of our citizens on how we spend their money? Yes, their money. The money from their hard work and sweat. But no matter the outcome of today's votes, we all know that our work is not done. Our legacy must not be determined on today's action. My desire is that it will be determined on what we must do together as a body in the days, weeks, months, and years ahead.
Mr. Davis to close.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Thank you to everyone who spoke on the bill. Clearly, we have a different set of opinions on some of the issues, but I think Representative Harris said it best. We need to do this because without doing this, some people talk about that cliff, but without this, we're over the cliff. This stops us. Now, is it everything that everyone would like? No, because we don't fully fund higher education. We're still not providing all the resources we need to our human service providers. But this is a step truly in the right direction. This is the direction that we need to go. Someone's talked about bipartisanship and meeting. Well, we have been meeting. Greg Harris has led our budget team, and he's done a fantastic job in leading our budget team, along with Representative Anderson over there. Now, if you weren't invited to be a part of that, that's not our fault. That's somebody else's fault. So if that's what you want to do, representatives talked about being a part of the discussions, well, ask to be a part of the discussions. Don't stand on the outside and throw darts at those who are in the conversations making this work. It's very important. And lastly, let me just say, threats are not the way to govern. We've heard too many times from members on both sides of the aisle that they are getting threats. At what point, some point, you got to take those threats seriously. You don't want to dismiss them because we've seen too many instances in the United States where individuals are taking actions into their own hands and harming people and their families. This is not the way we want to do it. So under these circumstances. So again, we thank you for those who spoke earlier. We appreciate those things that you said. And yes, this is not over. Mr. Speaker, I ask for a yes vote.
Gentleman moves to override the total veto of the governor. This bill requires 71 votes. Those in favor of the gentleman's motion will vote yes. Opposed, no. The voting is open. Have all voted who wish. Have all voted who wish. Have all voted who wish. Please take the record. On this question, there are 71 voting yes, 42 voting no, and the gentleman's motion is approved, and the House, the total veto of the governor is overridden, and this bill, having received a constitutional majority, is hereby declared passed.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, I move that the House concur with the Senate and that Senate Bill 42 do pass, notwithstanding the veto of the governor.
Leader Curry is recognized.
Thank you. This is a question for purposes of legislative intent. Are the new bonds authorized by Section 7.6 of the General Obligation Bond Act intended to be repaid on a level principal repayment schedule, as is consistent with Section 9 of the GO Bond Act?
Yes, this bill provides no exemption from the level principal repayment schedule as provided in Section 9 of the General Obligation Bond Act.
Thank you. That was not only the right answer, it was an excellent answer. I appreciate it.
Mr. Harris to close.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen of the House. I would appreciate an aye vote.
Gentleman moves that the House concur with the Senate and that this bill pass, notwithstanding the veto of the governor. This requires 71 votes. Those in favor of the gentleman's motion will vote yes. Opposed, no. The voting is open. Have all voted who wish. Have all voted who wish. Have all voted who wish. Please take the record on this question. There are 71 voting yes, 41 voting no, and the House does override the veto of the governor, and notwithstanding the veto of the governor, this bill, having received a constitutional majority, is hereby declared passed. On page 11 of the calendar, under total vetoes, appears Senate Bill 6. Mr. Harris.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, I move that the House concur with the Senate and that Senate Bill 6 do pass, notwithstanding the veto of the governor.
There being no debate, those in favor of the gentleman's motion will... Those in favor of the gentleman's motion will vote yes. Opposed, no. The voting is open. Have all voted who wish? Have all voted who wish? Mr. Clerk, please take the record. On this question, there are 74 voting yes, 37 voting no, and the House adopts the motion, and the House overrides the veto of the governor, and this bill, having received the constitutional majority, is hereby declared passed. Chair recognizes Mr. Crespo.
Thank you, Speaker. Just for the record, for Senate Bill 6, I should have been recorded as voting yes.
The record will reflect your intention. Page 11 of the calendar, under the order of concurrence, House Bill 1955. Mr. Fortner, please proceed, sir.
Thank you, Speaker. House Bill 1955 is the trailer bill for Senate Bill 1417, which was the update for the E-Waste Act. At that time, we mentioned that we knew there would have to be a trailer so that there would be the provisions to make sure that the EPA could implement it, and other concerns by industry were addressed. After negotiations, this motion will allow us to pass a bill that meets and is agreed by all the parties. I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
Gentleman moves that the House concur in Senate Amendment Number 1 to House Bill 1955. There being no debate, those in favor of the gentleman's motion will vote yes. Opposed, no. The voting is open. Have all voted who wish? Have all voted who wish? Have all voted who wish? Mr. Clerk, please take the record. On this question, there are 106 voting yes, 5 voting no, and the House does concur with Senate Amendment Number 1 to House Bill 1955, and this bill, having received the constitutional majority, is hereby declared passed.
Ladies and gentlemen of the House, today Republicans and Democrats stood together to enact a bipartisan, balanced budget and end a destructive 736-day impasse. Our budget agreement was made possible by legislators on both sides of the aisle who looked beyond partisan differences and put the best interest of our state and its residents first. This is what happens when people have the best interest of our state in mind and work in good faith to come to a resolution. Our agreement shows what can happen when people work cooperatively and negotiate in good faith. Despite the rhetoric, there were many meetings and discussions and much give and take on both sides of the aisle. The people in this chamber did not do what was easy today, but we did what was right for the future of our state. There are a lot of things that will be said about this vote, but the most important thing I can point to is that Republican legislators and Democratic legislators got this done together. And remember, we are spending less than this, under this budget, than the spending level proposed to be spent by the governor. That in and of itself is a testament to the bipartisan cooperation that got Illinois its first budget in 3 years. There's still more work to be done. Democrats plan to continue working with our colleagues across the aisle to address the governor's issues unrelated to the budget. We hope to continue to move forward in a truly cooperative, bipartisan manner, and we continue to work to heal the wounds of the last 3 years. Again, thank you to all of you for persevering through this unbelievable struggle. Thank you very, very much. I wish you all get some well-deserved rest and solitude and enjoy your time away, because we may be back before long. Thank you again.
And now Leader Curry, pursuant to the adjournment resolution that we have already adopted, moves that the House stand adjourned until the call of the Speaker. Those in favor say yes, opposed no. The ayes have it, and the House stands adjourned until the call of the Speaker.
You're watching the Illinois Channel, an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois.
Next from Springfield, we sit down with Sheila Weinberg, the founder and CEO of the Institute for Truth in Accounting, which examines state spending and budgeting issues, and talk about why she started the organization, as well as the cost to Illinois taxpayers for state spending, and whether or not there is a point Illinois goes over the financial cliff. This runs about 30 minutes.
Sheila Weinberg, thanks for joining us again on the Illinois Channel.
Oh, thanks for having me again, Terry.
It's been a while. It's good to see you, but sadly, our economy is, and our state finances are no better off since the last time we spoke. You run Truth in Accounting, and tell us just briefly, what was the motivation for starting it? You had a problem, I know from one of our prior conversations on camera, that you weren't trusting the numbers that the government puts out, either at the federal level or at the state level. Is that more or less the...
Yeah, that's right. And, I started it over, honestly, the 2000 presidential election, when I realized that there was a lot of debate on, I don't know if you remember, Bush was saying, hey, I'm going to return this surplus. Remember, there were surpluses as far as the eye could see we had back then. And Bush was going to return it to the American public in the form of a tax cut, and Gore was going to put it in the lockbox. And I'd studied the federal budget, and I understood that there really wasn't a surplus. In fact, if you handled Social Security at that point as like a private corporation would handle a pension, we were actually running a $500 billion deficit just in that one program. So instead of talking about this, fictitious surplus, and the debt was going up at the same time while we were running a surplus, which I didn't quite understand, we should have been talking about, hey, the baby boomers are coming up, retiring, what are we going to do about that? But we were focused on the wrong thing because we had the wrong numbers. And so once the election happened, I'm like, let me get this straight. We just elected the leader of the largest financial organization in the world, the federal government of the United States, based upon the wrong numbers. And I'm not a complainer, I'm a doer. I really felt that I needed to educate the public about the true numbers and try to get the governments to start to produce them.
So 16 years later, one of the really interesting things that you've developed is a website, and you call it, what is it, datalabs.org?
It's called statedatalab.org. It's a sister website to our truthinaccounting.org website. And what we did is we got to that by, every time that I spoke on the federal financial problems and how they budgeted poorly, people in Illinois here would say, well, if you think the feds are doing bad, you should see the state of Illinois. So we studied the books of the state of Illinois, i.e. they were telling us every year that they were balancing the budget. So the public thought, hey, well, everything's fine. They must be spending within their means because they're meeting the constitutional requirement to balance the budget. But we found that they were not including a lot of their employee compensation costs. They weren't including the pensions that employees were earning every single year, and that the state was incurring that compensation every cost, and they weren't including the retiree health care cost. And in addition to that, to make it even worse, they weren't including those liabilities on their balance sheets, the pension liability or the retiree health care liability. So we felt that citizens and their elected leaders were making financial decisions not knowing the true numbers. So we took it upon ourselves to calculate the true financial condition of not just Illinois, but every single state in the state. And from that, we developed something called the taxpayer burden. So we took, here's the assets of the state, here's the liabilities, and how much money do you need to pay those bills? and we divided that by the number of taxpayers in every state to come up with what we call taxpayer burden. And the taxpayer burden represents the amount that each taxpayer in the state is going to have to send down to Springfield. In this case, Illinois, right now, we have a $45,500 taxpayer burden. So each
per citizen, which means even if you're 5 years old, that's your burden.
We actually call it's called a taxpayer burden. So it is actually
it is by taxpayers.
It is taxpayers.
Okay, not per capita.
Not per capita.
Okay.
And that's $45,500 per taxpayers. So, but those taxpayers are going to have to pay that amount of taxes in the future, and they're not going to receive any goods or services for those taxes. So in Illinois, it's $45,500. New Jersey's actually worse, and Connecticut's actually worse than Illinois. But once we developed this taxpayer burden and started to compare states, people would say, well, you're not looking at a whole picture. You know, for example, Connecticut would have a higher GDP than Louisiana, or they might have higher median income. So, you know, you're not looking at everything and we're like, oh my God, we have a large enough study. Do we need to include that in our studies? So what we did though is we developed a website because we couldn't find one. There was no website where an ordinary citizen could go in and say, how is my state doing compared to another state? You know, how do we have more people leaving the state? Do we have more attorneys in the state? You know, which state is the best to do business in? There was no website to do that, so we developed something called statedatalab.org, a sister website to our truthandaccounting.org, where citizens can go on and they can generate charts. They can go select Illinois, Wisconsin, say, hey, maybe if you're thinking of moving, you could select Texas. Is Texas doing better than Illinois? You know, which state's doing better? Then you can generate a chart that shows you exactly what's going on and how to compare those states.
So as we look at Illinois, you said it was $45,000, but per taxpayer. What is the actual pension deficit right now? That's a number we often hear, but I don't know that we typically get an accurate number. Do you know what the accurate number?
Well, we use the numbers that the state's actuaries calculate. So we look at their assets that each pension plan has available, and then the benefits that they have promised. And that number, the unfunded pension liability, is $118 billion at this point in time. So that's part of the $212 billion that we include in calculating how much money is needed to pay the state's bills.
Now that money, the $118 billion, that would be needed to pay those pension benefits, but obviously not all like next year. So over what period of time would those be needed? You've done like a life expectancy on the recipients?
Well,
or?
The actual, you know, we don't calculate the numbers. We actually
but
use the state's actuaries calculate them. So it is over the lifetime of the employees how much you're going to have to pay. But I must emphasize, this is the amount that they have incurred to date. This is the amount they've already promised. This isn't talking about how much, you know, employees are going to get, you know, earn in the future. This is how much they've just incurred to date. So it's similar to a business, looking at a business. If the state of Illinois shut down today, it would have to come up with $118 billion just to pay the benefits that have been incurred to date and earned to date. So those numbers will just continue to rise unless more assets are provided to reduce that unfunded liability.
And that's just one of our unfunded liabilities. There's the health care costs and other things. What would you say is the state of Illinois, not legally, but practically bankrupt?
Well, it depends on your definition of bankrupt. It's not, as you say, it's not legally bankrupt, but the Webster Dictionary definition of bankrupt is where an entity does not have enough money to pay the bills that they have. So obviously Illinois is $184 billion short of assets available to pay the bills that they have accumulated to date. So under that definition, the state of Illinois is bankrupt. The great thing that we have this year, which we haven't had in the past, is that the state's balance sheet finally is reporting the net pension liability. It is reporting the liability of the state. Previously, about more than 50% of the pension liability was hidden off of its balance sheet. We worked for years at Truth in Accounting to get the Governmental Accounting Standards Board to require the state and other states to put their pension liability on their balance sheet. And this year, that liability, if you go to the state's audited financial report, you will see it. Now, but also, even in addition, you can go to your own local government and see theirs. So I can go to my village at Glencoe and finally see how much pension liability Glencoe has, how much Naperville has, how much the city of Chicago has. So it's greater transparency for the citizens. And in 2 years, the governments are also going to have to put their retiree health care liabilities on the face of their balance sheets. So
in 2 years?
In 2 years. So in 2 years, they'll have a full picture. But this year, exciting for us accountants, I don't know if it's exciting for other people, the pension liability is finally on the face of the government's balance sheet.
What are the taxpayers? I mean, here in a democracy, we're supposed to make decisions based on, hopefully, solid information, which is what you're providing. What are we to make of it? I mean, the average person is going to hear, I'm not going to put $45,000 toward the state of Illinois to pay their bills. I mean, I can hardly pay my bills.
Well, one thing that they should do is, what Thomas Jefferson once said is, that an informed electorate is the basis of a sound democracy. Well, unfortunately, we have a misinformed electorate. So citizens do need to get themselves more informed about this. When you hear the governor or the legislatures or the mayor or your local officials say, we are balancing our budgets, you just go ahead and say, no, you're not including all the cost. So I guess what they can do is be very skeptical about the information that they're getting provided and demand that, no, you need to include all the costs when you balance your budget. Because what it's allowed them to do here in Illinois is expand the government beyond what the citizens are willing to pay for, because the citizens haven't known the true cost of the government. So that's a problem.
Do you talk to legislators, and counsel them on this when there's some proposal before the state, or do you just counsel them and say, here's what you're facing?
Well, what we do is we counsel them on here's what you're facing, the $184 billion financial hole. But we also counsel them on something called fact-based budgeting, which is full accrual calculations and techniques. The IRS doesn't allow corporations to do if you make more than $5 million, you can't do your books using cash basis or checkbook accounting. But that's how the state does its billions of dollars of budget. It does it on a checkbook basis. So what that means is, okay, the state's constitution says it's only money in and money out, okay? So specifically, the state's constitution has a constitutional requirement to balance the budget. So, but what it says is your funds available have to equal your expenditures. So, if you borrow money, that becomes available for you to spend. And it only says expenditures. So you'll hear a lot about these unpaid bills. Well, this is a function of this definition of expenditures. So again, it's only the checks you write. So if you get a invoice from your vendor and you don't write the check for it, you don't have to include that in your balanced budget requirement. We recommend fact-based budgeting. Go ahead and include all your costs in your budget and all your expenses and all the invoices that you've gotten, and also only include the revenue that you've earned. You cannot include loan proceeds as revenue if you're truly balancing your budget. So we're encouraging the state to do that and local governments to do that. Honestly, we've had a really hard pull in Illinois to get legislators to do that, because they would be using the truthful numbers to balance the budget. And they come back to us and say, Sheila, we can't balance the budget using the bad numbers. Why do you think why would we want, there's no way we could do it using the good numbers. So what we've said is, okay, go ahead and balance the budget any crazy way you want to, but before you pass the budget, go ahead and do a pro forma income statement and a pro forma balance sheet. What are those going to look like once this budget has been enacted? So for example, this year's financial statements for 2016 will probably show
for the state
will probably show between a $4 to $9 billion deficit. Well, that would have been good to know before we pass, quote, a balanced budget. So you go ahead and pretend you're balanced, but before you pass it, let's go ahead and figure out the reality of what it is.
Now, have you looked at Chicago as well? As far as
we have looked at Chicago. I can't remember the newest numbers off the top of the head. The numbers I remember is when we did them a couple of years ago, and that was $28,000 per taxpayer. So
if you're a resident of Chicago, you have that $28,000 on top of the $45,000.
Yeah, and then we did Cook County, which was about $3,000. The Chicago Public Schools, and that I think was about $19,000. And then you have to add the state on top of that. Altogether, the last time we calculated, it was more than $78,000 per taxpayer in the if you're
living in Cook County in Chicago.
Yes. So and again, these are taxes you're going to have to pay, and you're not going to receive any goods or services for those.
Because that's going to pay maybe someone to be retired in Florida.
Right. And you're saying, well, I can't really do that. I'm not going to pay that. Da 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 da. Well, again, when the mayor comes out and says, "I've balanced the budget," or CPS comes out and says, "We've balanced the budget," you need to ask them, well, okay, the mayor, you've told us every single year that you've balanced the budget. Your $1 to $3 billion, your audited financial statements show that you're $1 to $3 billion in deficit, even though you keep on telling us you balance the budget. Are you going to really balance the budget this year, or are you just pretending that you're balancing the budget? And one of the reasons that Chicago's in horrible shape is, again, just like Illinois, the pensions. But the mayor has only been paying 1/3 to 1/4 of what he should have been to the pension plan. So it's kind of like you complaining to me, well, I'm in horrible financial shape. Well, you haven't even been paying the minimum on your credit card, okay? So he's not been paying the minimum on the pension, the city's pension credit card.
The pensions, both at the state and at the city of Chicago level, and any number of other places, am I correct in saying the real issue there was that they weren't making a large enough contribution? People would say, well, we wouldn't have had a problem with the state pensions if they had been making their payments all along. I tend to think they would have had a problem anyway, that their contributions weren't really large enough to match the size of the benefits. Am I right on that?
You would not have an unfunded liability of $818 billion.
No, but you would not that high.
If they were making the contributions to match the pensions. So two things that they did is, one, each year, it's not, this is rocket science. But they do have rocket scientists to calculate how much you should put into the pensions. And the actuaries told them every single year, here's how much you should put in. And every single year they did not put enough in. And then some years they did like benefit enhancements. So they even increased the liability larger than what it should be, what it was in the past. But they didn't fund it. They just said, here, have employees have all these benefits, but they didn't put any money aside to pay for those benefits.
How do we stop those in government service from doing this, from basically bankrupting our communities or our state?
Well, we would say go ahead and require fact-based budgeting. Include only the revenues that you earn, include all your expenses. Go ahead and make sure those pensions and retiree health. Right now, state and local governments do not fund those retiree health care benefits. So the employees, they promise them to the employees, but they don't include any money set aside to pay those. Well, go ahead, and we would say your budget really isn't balanced if you're not setting money aside to pay those. So go ahead and require that your budgets be really balanced, including pre-funding your retiree health care benefits, including the proper amount into your pension plans. Let's get started that way. And then I always tell people, truth in accounting, we don't have any here's the silver bullet to fix this. But what I tell people is we have a cash shortfall. In Illinois, we have $184 billion cash shortfall. The only way to fix that is to bring more money in or take less money out of the system. And so be careful when there's reforms that are being proposed in the state. a lot of times they have a tendency to do the opposite. There'll be tax cuts, which would bring less money into the state, or there might be benefit enhancements, which would require more money to go out. But so keep in mind, when all these politicians are spouting, hey, here's how I'm going to fix it, does that bring more money into the system, or does it take less money out? And if it doesn't do one of those two, then they're really not fixing the problem. They're making it worse.
If you were the governor, what would you do?
Well, what I would do again is, pass fact-based budgeting right away. At least, let's go ahead and tell the public where we're at, where we truly are or aren't balancing the budget. And then, you'd have to come up with proposals to either bring more money in or take less money out.
I should have added before we close out, you look at some of the other states. You don't look at just Illinois.
We do a financial state of the states. So we look at every single state. We do a financial state of Illinois, financial state of Indiana, financial state of Wisconsin for every single state. We did a financial state of Puerto Rico. And we do a financial state of the United States government. So, which you think things here in Illinois are bad, those are also bad news from that arena.
The reason I was going to say that is we look around. Illinois is among the worst, maybe the worst example, or in certain categories. But so many states have similar problems, whether they are to the extent that we have or not.
We do have 11 states last year that did have what we call a taxpayer surplus. They didn't have a burden. They actually have extra money for.
What are they doing right?
Oh, well, they actually, they only include the right revenue. They don't include loan proceeds in their and they pay their bills when they incur them. They fund their pensions. A lot of them are.
And they accurately project their revenue and then base their spending according to revenue.
Yes, they actually truly balance their budget. So a lot of them are oil-rich, natural resources-rich. Were. So it's going to be interesting to see how how much
the oil
that's going to
revenue is really dropping off.
Yeah, how much that's going to affect them. They just a lot of them, okay, we're going to have pensions, but we're going to fund them. We're going to be required to fund them. Hopefully we can get Illinois and those other states to at least start to realize that, because if they don't fund it, we haven't been able to have enough information to hold our elected officials accountable. Again, they've actually been giving us more government than we've been paying for. And so, if, for example, here in Illinois, we would have had to raise taxes to fund these pensions in the past, to cover the pension compensation part, would all of those people continue to get reelected?
One of my criticisms among the media is that so many of them are financially illiterate, and they can't follow some of these financial discussions when they're covering the government. Do you ever work with media organizations, or what would you advise those who are going in to cover government about what numbers matter and what should they pay attention to?
Well, what they should pay attention is to the audited financial statements. The budgets are, honestly, at Truth in Accounting, we do not study budgets because they're just political mumbo jumbo. And you just chase your tail around, and this number, that number, and this fund, and that funded. And so we ignore them. We say, go ahead and look at your audited financial statements. And that's why we encourage, before the budget's passed, that's usually this thick, just on the top of it, put a 2-page balance sheet and income statement. Work with the auditors and the people who prepare the audited financial statements using good standards, and recast the budget using that.
Sheila Weinberg, we appreciate you joining us.
Well, thanks for having me again, Terry.
Thanks.